First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution protects the freedom of speech, religion, and the press. But what exactly does freedom of speech mean? Where is the line when one's words become dangerous and incite violence? Who exactly gets to decide when someone's expression of opinion has gone too far? Joining us now to tell us more is Ken Paulson, the director of the Free Speech Center, based at Middle Tennessee State University. Ken is also the former editor-in-chief of USA Today and spent most of his career in journalism and looking at First Amendment law. Ken is now the director at the Free Speech Center, a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy center. Ken, welcome to Hello Houston. Oh, Ken, it looks like you're muted. And if you would like to join the conversation, you can give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870. Ken, I believe we can hear you now.
Very good. I'm delighted to join you.
Yes.
Apparently, you're only booking guests who are having really busy weeks.
Yes. Well, we gave you the freedom to speak by turning up your mic, so now you're with us.
But that's the thing. Can we continue to say freedom of speech is protected by the First Amendment? And right off the bat, I wonder, who is the Constitution protecting freedom of speech for and from whom?
Well, it's interesting. We love saying that we live in the land of the free, and we all have this assumption that whatever we say or do, that's protected. We're in the U.S. But in fact, the First Amendment of the Constitution says Congress shall make no law. It means government shall make no rule or regulation that limits your speech. Unfortunately, for a lot of people in recent weeks, it doesn't say your boss can make no rule. The First Amendment actually doesn't apply in the private workplace. So that's been a source of a lot of consternation and controversy because people have posted things that got them in trouble with their bosses. And the remarkable thing, and most Americans don't know this, about 82% of Americans have no free speech protection at work. If you don't believe that, try marching on your boss's office. It won't last long. And
Right.
And the only time the First Amendment comes into play in terms of our political commentary outside of direct government interference is if we work for government. And if you work for government, basically courts will say, well, wait a second. Yeah, you're employed by government. They're your boss, but it's also the government shutting you up. So they do a test, and the test basically says, is your right to free speech in that job, does that outweigh the potentially dramatic impact on the workplace? So that's called the Pickering test, and it's time honored. But this last 2 weeks, people have really discovered what the law is about. And that's why, a principal or a very prominent teacher and others are suddenly without jobs because the disruption at the workplace has become so profound.
Talk to me a little bit about how the concept of free speech intersects with the idea of censorship and how these things are the same and how they're different.
Well, again, because we live in a nation in which the government can't interfere with what we say. First of all, I want to put in a plug for a bit of history here. When you think about it, in 1791, when we adopted the Bill of Rights in this country, we became the first nation in the history of the world to say to its population, you can say what you want, you can pray to the God of your choice, you can write whatever you want. You can also, by the way, complain in the form of petition and assembly and try to get things changed. When we said that first generation of Americans said that, it created a nation unlike any other. What that meant was that we were going to share all our ideas, we're going to speak confidently, we were going to be creative, and we were going to value creativity. Patents float from that. What we now know as copyrighted protected material, inventions float from that. A nation built on ideas, a free flow of ideas, is going to be a great nation. And it's not a coincidence that the strongest, most dynamic, most creative nation in the history of the world is also the most free. So when you talk about censorship, you're saying we're cutting that flow off. We're going to put a dam here. And these kinds of ideas we no longer want to hear. That's what censorship does. It cuts America off at the knees. The very thing that made us great, it endeavors to stop.
Does it amaze you at how quickly this is happening?
Yeah, it's been the most astonishing 2 weeks I've seen in free expression and journalism. And I'm talking in the long run. I mean, you have to go back to John Adams to see something comparable to this. And And part of it is our nation has got this velocity about it, communications. It's you can post something and within 3 hours you've lost your job because 20,000 people have complained about you on social media. It's startling. In one respect, the founding fathers would think, how cool is this? We want everybody to have free speech. And now look how it's exploded, but it's also exploded in the negative sense in that there's a lot of penalizing of free speech in this country.
So we've touched on free speech and the difference between censorship. Now, what about hate speech? And what is the definition of that? And how does that work in all of this?
Sure. Hate speech is actually what the First Amendment was intended to protect. You know, you heard the Department of Justice make a point about there's free speech and there's hate speech. Well, no, absolutely wrong. Free speech is hate speech and always has been. And here's why. I mentioned John Adams. There was a Alien and Sedition Act in the very birth of our country that he used to put people in jail. He put editors in jail and writers in jail because he didn't like the way they talked about the second president of the United States. He hated what they had to say, and he regarded it as hateful. So we had to make sure the First Amendment was intact to protect us from government leaders who wanted to shut us up because of our criticisms. Everybody in power, I'll give you an example. Think about the Civil Rights Movement. People who lived in Alabama in 1961 did not think of themselves as bigots, and they certainly all weren't. But those who were bigots didn't recognize it. They were standing up for tradition and history or whatever they told themselves. And they would have described Martin Luther King Jr. as a hate monger. He came down and called them names, challenged their destiny, challenged their history, mocked Confederate generals in their view. And that was hate speech. And they would have shut up Martin Luther King Jr. for marching in their towns and saying these hateful things. Hate speech is what you need to protect. No need to protect popular speech. If it's popular, no one tries to shut it down. It's the hate speech. It's the aggressive speech. It's a speech that speaks truth to power that they seek to shut down. And in truth, in more than 2 centuries of American history, it has worked amazingly well. And we need to keep that in mind.
What about political speech? Is there such a term? I don't think I'm making that up. It's not necessarily hate speech. It's not necessarily happy speech, but it is speech with a definite end in sight.
Absolutely. That's a terrific question. Yes, there are degrees of speech, free speech in this country. And when the First Amendment was established, free speech was established, the primary purpose of it was to talk about the people in charge and call them out. I mean, that's why we have a free press. The idea was they needed some check on people in power. And so over the years, the Supreme Court has, rendered dozens of rulings that remind us that the number one most important form of speech in America is that which we began with, political speech. It's a category, a legal category, and it basically is about holding government accountable. So that's, it's interesting in the wake of the Jimmy Kimmel controversy, that was classic political speech. He was criticizing a major political party and the president of the United States for what they said in the wake of this terrible assassination. And then at the other end, the lowest end of free speech, but still with some First Amendment protection, would be topless dancing, and which is regarded as an art form in some places, and that is protected. And then advertising is, again, commercial speech where they're trying to sell you something. That is nowhere near as essential as political speech. And, the irony is that the most controversial speech today that people are trying to shut down all have to do with the public sphere and how we can be a better nation.
We are watching this unfold in real time pretty much at what's happening, especially in the late night realm. And I'm curious, at the end of the day, is it big business? Is it the economy that's going to save free speech?
Economy saving free speech. My hope actually is that the American people will save free speech. I mean, you look at the Jimmy Kimmel situation, the backlash against ABC was enormous on multiple fronts. And now Jimmy Kimmel will be back on the air tonight. We don't know, will it be the same Jimmy Kimmel? Will he apologize? Has he agreed in any way to temper his speech? We don't know yet whether there's a victory for free speech, but I do feel like we're kind of at a tipping point that when the President of the United States says, two down, two to go, about hosts who criticize him, I think Americans go, well, wait a second, what's happening here? And so using economic pressure through boycotts, that's very effective.
Well,
Yeah,
even
in the end, these are corporations, and the bottom line matters to them.
but even some of our Republican congressmen, Senator Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, they also came out as Republicans and said, wait a minute, this is a slippery slope. Do you think that maybe created a bellwether for other Republicans to have the courage to stand by the First Amendment up against an administration that wants to kibosh it?
Yeah, there's no question. Ted Cruz's statement was enormously helpful, encouraged others to make the same statement. I will tell you, we're a nonpartisan senator. I have a very clear bias in favor of the Constitution, and so I will applaud any politician who stands up for free speech. But I will tell you, I'm puzzled because you mentioned Republicans. The Republicans were leaders in American political thought over the last 10 years in calling out what they described as cancel culture. Over and over again, they took on Facebook and said, you can't shut people out just because of what they're saying. That's un-American. And now the pendulum has swung, and I really don't understand why. If cancel culture was bad in 2019 or 2022, why would it be acceptable to try to shut people up now? Because there's been a shift in power. We have to, as a nation, have to figure out what's it going to be, America? Do we believe in free speech or not?
Well, if you collapse the criticism, then you can take over as an authoritarian, can't you?
That is a trademark of every single dictator in world history. You take out the thought leaders, you attack the academies, the colleges, the universities, the scientists, the journalists, and the critical thinkers, and your path has become easier. Is that happening now? I wouldn't presume to say so, but it's a very uncomfortable time in American history.
Ken, you mentioned cancel culture and you talk about the importance of our Constitution. How does cancel culture play into our Constitution?
Well,
or does
cancel
it?
culture, well, it can. It's certainly, our government is prohibited from punishing us. And because of that, we actually have an atmosphere where we can live up to the promise of the First Amendment, the promise of free speech. So when we talk free speech, it's not a legally obtained right except protection against the government. But what it is kind of a national vibe. And we have always taken great pride in the marketplace of ideas. I have an idea. You have an idea. Let's debate and discuss it. And out of that, in theory, and this is the theory of the first generation of Americans, the best ideas will rise to the top. The best solutions will rise to the top. Now, when we talk about cancel culture, we're also talking about an environment in which people love to hear themselves speak. We're polarized, and everybody's certain they know. And we listen to only each other who share our views. So I have the right to speak freely, but it doesn't mean anything unless I also feel an obligation to listen. If there's not an exchange of ideas, then it's just the bumper sticker battle. And so cancel culture intimidates people. There have always been penalties. I mean, I will tell you, initially I objected to the phrase cancel culture as though it were something new. No, this happened to Eartha Kitt in 1967 when she criticized the Vietnam War. It happened to the Dixie Chicks in the early of this century. That has always been there, but never at this philosophy. And it never had a cute name before, like cancel culture.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about, we often talk about with the First Amendment saying you have the right to express your opinions, but there's also responsibility that comes with it, correct? And how do you help people understand that part of it?
We're on a little rocky ground now, is that we're seeing third grade teachers being punished for posting things on Facebook. That's gotten kind of intense. And I think people have to think long and hard about whether that comment by a teacher is going to disrupt that third grade? Are those students going to put down their blocks and say, Miss Anderson, let's talk about your Facebook posts? It's gotten crazy. But having said that, we always have to take accountability for our speech. You know, if you open your mouth and share your views, the point is to share it with others. Some will disagree. And although the level of punishment has grown, the bottom line is you can get in trouble with your speech by lying about somebody. You know, libel and slander laws are consistent with the First Amendment because the First Amendment protects our right to speak in betterment of a stronger nation. But lies are not protected by the First Amendment in that context if you damage somebody's reputation. There are always going to be consequences. Well, actually, not even consequences. There things will happen because of your speech. Sometimes very good. People will get up and applaud. They will think you're the smartest person in the room. And other times people will boo and criticize you. But that's the nature of a free nation. There are no guarantees. And that's why it takes a little courage to speak your mind, particularly now. But now is when we need it, and we need a lot more listening as well.
Thoughts on putting the Ten Commandments on schoolroom walls?
That's something we're dealing with here in Texas now.
Yeah. Obviously, there's very strong opinions in your state about the need to do that. It's unfortunate, not that people feel the need to have uplifting statements in their schools, but the very fact that along with that early experiment, you can say whatever you want, you can worship the God of your choice. And government's not going to have any role in selecting what the right religion is. Government is not going to have any role in deciding telling you how to worship. Now, they reached this conclusion when there was almost no diversity in faith, relatively little diversity in faith, and yet they still felt the need to guarantee it. And we are so much better served if everyone feels comfortable in the public sphere, in public schools, and is able to worship as they choose to. Take religion off the table, keep politics out of schools, except for thoughtful reflections on what's going on in the world. That's where we need to be as a nation. Again, it's one of those building blocks. I talked about earlier how our nation is the greatest in the world because of those commitments. And we can't lose sight of that. There's this constant battle in this country about the right of coaches to say prayers with their football teams, and entire communities, appropriate for Texas, believe it's absolutely right. They will tell you that this teacher has a coach has a right to express their faith because we're a free country. But what about that halfback who happens not to share the coach's faith? They deserve some protection and some space as well. And they actually have the right not to pray as others do. So we have lost sight of the other guy in almost every aspect of American society. And we look out for ourselves and don't do a very good job of understanding what other people are up against.
Oh, we got to leave it there. But
Ken,
I'll just say pray for us, Ken.
Yeah. I was going to say, Ken, thank you. And you going to be watching Jimmy Kimmel tonight?
Absolutely. I'm thinking maybe Super Bowl numbers tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
We will see. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Ken Paulson is the director at the Free Speech Center, a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy center. Again, Ken, thank you for joining us on Hello Houston.